Book Token is a really interesting project where they are possibly putting the entirety of published human knowledge onto the blockchain. They've partnered up with major publishers around the world, and having that database of books and having it being able to be placed on the blockchain opens up a whole bunch of new possibilities. He even talks about a read to earn system, which they'll be building out on the platform as well. And I'm pretty excited to see what Book Token has in store for us. Let's get into this interview.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast.
I have Josh joining me on this podcast interview to talk about Book Token, a project that I've been looking at for a little while, and I think it's really interesting. I didn't even realize this was a problem that needed to be solved. And Josh is here to talk all about it. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Pete. Appreciate it.
All right, so let's start off with your crypto journey. How did you get into this space? And then how did you end up with in Cardano?
For sure. Actually was working at a fast-growing .com when the Satoshi's original white paper came out, and we all kind of passed it around and debated whether or not it was some kind of scam. Then over the course of a couple of years, I'm not an engineer by trade. I'm more towards the product and UX side of things. And so I'd gone, when it hit $60, I went to some engineers and I said, hey, I think there's something here. And then they're like, no, this is a scam. And then I went back when it was, like $800, and I got the same story about, it costs more electricity to, mine this. And so eventually in probably summer of 2017, I was like, there's something here. And at that time, I was actually in the book publishing industry on the tech side, and started to kind of theorize the idea of like, what is blockchain and like just decentralized storage in general mean in regards to kind of what we were doing at that time for that industry, and got really sucked into all the day trading stuff. In my background in technology, I sort of approached a lot of new projects, and I went down this, you go down the rabbit hole when you get in. And so went down a lot of rabbit holes and participated in a bunch of those, ICOs that didn't work out. And some stuff was good, some stuff was bad. That's kind of how I came into it. So I found Cardano through that process. It was probably late 2017, early 2018, maybe. A friend of mine had turned me on to it, and I then started to go down the path of, okay, it's getting deeper, and like, what's proof of stake versus proof of work. And so got into Cardano, I'd say pretty early, and liked Charles, and just, the way he approaches things is I think, coming from a tech background, was refreshing to see this idea of, we're going to build what needs to be built, and we don't care about market factors or influences telling us what we should or shouldn't do. We're on this path, and we're going to build the thing that needs to be built for the future. Because I had come from a lot of startups and then a lot of big tech, and had been, at that particular time too, was sort of at odds with a board of directors that I was under. And, when it gets controlled by a bunch of VC money, they're making decisions not based on the longevity or the scalability of the company. So, I just kind of fell in love with the whole Cardano project, and sort of stuck with it ever since. And, jumped into different proof of stake models along the way. Got real early in Algorand, and watched DOT forever until it finally opened up. And I like all those projects. I just feel like Cardano is the best match for what we're doing and what we're trying to do.
Cool. Your intro journey into crypto sounds like mine, with all the ICO booms and the get rich quick, ICOs back then.
They look attractive,
it was definitely a fun time. Like if you manage to find the right ICOs to jump in on early, it some paid off quite well. It was quite interesting.
It's true, and it's like being in the States, it was a little bit difficult because like a lot of that stuff would happen. We didn't have Binance here at that time, so I was finding backdoor ways, right? You're using Tor browsers and VPN and stuff, and then a lot of that was coming. Like the projects I was really interested in were on, a lot of the exchanges based out of China. And at that time, it was like, trying to use Google Translate. And then it's like, okay, I'm about to send a large amount of money to something that I don't know if it's a total scam or not, but let's hope. And, but that's where a lot of the cool stuff was happening. So I'm sure you had a different perspective being where you're at, and access to just the over kind of regulation here of ICOs. And
yeah.
It's prohibitive. Yeah.
It was pretty easy here to lose a lot of money. So yeah, that's all I can say.
The tables were open. You can just walk in and lose it all.
Yeah.
It's funny.
So now you're building out this project on Cardano book token, and I had a look over the white paper, etc., and try to get a really good understanding of what you're trying to achieve. But can you give us the 30-second elevator pitch of what problem you're trying to solve and what you're building out with book token?
Yeah, for sure. So, the most simplified solution is it's books as NFTs, right? So it's not book covers or images as quotes from the author. It's the actual book, and we encrypt that file and we make it. We leverage NFT Web3 so that users can sell books back when they're done reading them, right? So kind of the problem and coming out of that industry. So, the brief history, we built this book company. We approached it as like kind of technologists. As we got into it, we realized that the way the industry works, they're actually just like licensing a copy of the book to you, so they can pull it back from you anytime. They can, an author can take it down, a publisher, Amazon or iBooks or Barnes and Noble or anybody can take your books at any time. And then the problem really becomes, and this was something we started to look into, just like conceptually the idea that probably back in 2015, somewhere around there, is that, I have a substantial Kindle shelf, and I have a lot of, books that I've read, listened to through Audible. The sum total value of that is basically zero. However, I've spent thousands of dollars buying all these books and reading them, but I can't do anything with them. So when we, it was probably about a year ago, actually, we started re-engaging some of our partners, and we were kind of prevented from being in that industry for a while. And so we were able to get back in, and discussions with them, it was like, shouldn't people be allowed to own the books that they buy? And if I own it, then that means I can resell it. And if I can resell it, then there should be a destination. There should be an exchange. And the difference in what we're doing versus, the tradition, I'd say the traditional NFT market is that, in a regular NFT, everybody can see that image. You basically own, effectively almost like the receipt that you bought that image. With ours, it has a component of encryption and then a fulfillment portion. So we're building like an e-reading platform out too, right? So if you own it, you have to also be able to see that content.
So you mentioned a couple of really cool things there, and one of them was the encryption side of things, and then the viewer, the reader that you're going to have in place. So I do like that, because at the moment with NFTs, if anyone knows your wallet, you'd be able to get in and basically download whatever's in there. So how are you approaching the encryption, and how's the experience with the viewer, the reader that you're producing for this? Considering that it sounds like you're doing not just readable PDFs, but also audio books. Yeah. Can you explain all that?
Yeah, for sure. So the approach that we've taken. So in the past, when we were working with publishers, and we worked with, we got into the ebook space right when the first iPad came out, and we had been at this social media startup and had sold it. And we were like, kind of, what's next? And we'd gotten involved with a few publishers through the course of that. And we sort of theorized, like, at that time, hey, books could be social and, people could have commentary inside the book and, build community and conversation around books and book titles. And so we started to go down this path and said, okay, let's go to publishing and see how this works, which is very, the interesting thing about publishing is outside of maybe banking, it's probably one of the oldest industries. So some of the companies we worked with were literally, 500 plus years old.
Wow.
And they had basically never changed anything functionally from, the time they bought a printing press centuries ago. They print books on paper and they ship them out. And that's how they operate. And so when we went to them, really the only, obviously the big player in space was Kindle, but they were still just an app, a standalone device. And so we walked in and we were like, well, this really should be, now that we have an iPad, this should be an application that anybody can, whether or not you're on Android or iPhone or on a desktop, like you should be able to read your book wherever, not just like on this one, device that's specifically for it. So we kind of we went down that path, and as we went down it with the publishers, and we ended up doing a lot of work with, there's basically, in the States at least, there's the big 5 publishers, and they pretty much control even worldwide, what's happening in publishing. And then there's tons and tons, probably 50,000, maybe 80,000 imprints and stuff underneath that. So we had basically the same catalog as Amazon. We had several million titles, and we, in order to get that, they're very rigorous about their DRM because they're concerned, their digital rights management, because they're very concerned about people stealing their content, right? So when we walked into the Web3 side of it, it's like a PDF, won't work for them because they, you can't just upload their IP freely where everybody can read it, because that's what they want you to purchase. So it works kind of opposite of traditional NFTs. So basically the method we came up with is similar to, how things are structured on that centralized side, but we break apart those files, right? Whether it's an EPUB file or or audio files. We shard those out, we encrypt all of them, we upload all those to decentralized storage, and then basically our reader then re-encrypts all of that if you have the key. So basically the NFT becomes your key to access that content. And so the content can be whatever, but structurally, we want everything to be completely decentralized, so that then no one person or entity or organization could take that down. So we talk about it in terms a lot of almost it's more there. An NFT book is more like a print book than a regular EPUB, because there's when something gets minted, it's basically printed and you can't undo it. You can't go out and collect them all. So, same thing with a print book. If you do a run of 1,000 print books and you sell those to, and they go out to retailers and people buy them, it's like, that's it, they're gone, and you can't, get those back. So
you also mentioned a couple of other things a little bit earlier on, and one of them was the marketplace and the value of the books. And I really like this, being able to resell my books, especially like you just mentioned then, if there's a limited run of 1,000 books, technically that becomes more valuable because other people want to read it. And, you could sell it on at a later date once you're done with it. And the secondary marketplace for this could be quite lucrative. So this would essentially be like how NFT marketplaces work now. Would the publishers and the authors get royalties or anything? Did you have anything like that planned?
Yeah, so that's a great. That's kind of where I left off that other part of the conversation. So that's exactly. So the interesting thing about publishing is they. Publishers, they don't get any data from retailers, and other than this is how many books sold, and here's a check. And they really want their authors to be able to engage more with their communities. And so and by using blockchain, we can see these secondhand sales go on, right? So once it goes into a marketplace, and I sell it to you, you sell it to somebody else, and so on and so forth, and it goes down this secondhand sell path. That's something they've never had access to before. And so there's kind of two components there, which is we have a royalty structure so they can be paid on all those secondhand sales. So the author, the publisher, the illustrator, they could even have a portion of that go to charity. A good for instance of that, actually, we're working with a publisher here that they have an author actually who's a little boy, and he's basically dying of cancer, and his wish is to be a published author. And so we're working with them because we're going to set it up so that all of the proceeds from the book actually pay to a wallet for Make-A-Wish. So there's really cool, these transitive royalties that extend over time. So it's once that book is published, then that royalty structure is written in that smart contract, and then it continues to get paid. So not only does it provide this, this record of account of who all has owned that, so that the publisher can then anonymously market and communicate to and provide a conduit for the author to talk to those readers, but it also continues to pay them over time, till the end of time, effectively.
That's absolutely brilliant. It's not the bit of the boy with terminal cancer, but everything around that that's put in place with the smart contracts, the Make-A-Wish Foundation. That's absolutely amazing. And to have something that can fund other projects like charities for indefinite future, that's absolutely amazing. So you're building out something really, really cool here. And you kind of alluded to it, but could people then become self-publishers through the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's funny is I think when we first got into publishing, we were very much of this mindset of, these publishers are taking all this money from authors, and we should work to build some construct to, in the publishers, because man, those terrible publishers. The problem with that thinking that we found was that they do so much for the author. Like an author, what most real authors want to do is they want to write. They don't want to, they don't want to figure out all the things that has to go along with that. And then even on the self-publishing side, I think once you get to a certain level and you can be a successful self-publisher versus if you're just, hey, I want to make a book and I've never done this before. And those are sort of two different scenarios. In our system, we account for both, really, right? So we want anybody to come in and be able to self-publish. We also want to support the publishers. And I think the interesting thing from the IP perspective, which is kind of funny, some of the conversations we've had with some different people in recent weeks, and specifically about, I hate publishers, this system, because you'll just be all independent. And it's like, okay, well, what are your favorite books? And it's like, oh man, I love Red Rising. And it's like, well, that's published through Penguin, and they're the biggest, one of the biggest IP holders on the planet. So the issue then becomes, what publishing houses really, they provide a lot of service to authors, but then I feel like it's just grossly undervalued from an IP perspective, right? And if you even take a step back or step up, holistically, it's these publishers manage and own effectively all the IP and the written information for humanity. And so the idea that we don't inherently have that on blockchain already, and that it is controlled centrally, and that, take for instance, right, a Russia-Ukraine thing could lead to somehow some destruction of some servers that just does away with some content. I think we look back on this time in history, before Web3 and before decentralized storage, and the idea that the collective knowledge of humanity and all written content was not, triple accounted and decentrally stored is, dangerous. And it's thank goodness we got through the dark ages of before Web3, because now if everything's redundant and we're not going to lose any information. So I feel like the publishers, they own such a massive amount of our intellectual property as humankind. And then as we, bring in more independence into that system as well. This, democratization to some extent of books will then also allow those who, the next, J.K. Rowling who comes in, right, who was declined like 30 times or something. Well, if she can come into this system, the next one of those, and they start to get great traction. Now we have like data, and in our reader, we actually track how much people read of each book, so that an author or publisher can see how, like, what the actual consumption of those books are too. So we can actually provide metrics to publishers that would then, have further deals and help accelerate, and, the independents that want to be with a publishing house and create a larger marketplace for them to work together.
I love the idea of the analytics behind the books and actually understanding, the engagement in the book and how much people are reading, how well the book's actually doing. Of course, there's privacy concerns that you may need to tackle, but I think they're quite minor compared to digitalizing and decentralizing all of human knowledge.
Well, for sure. And
That's pretty cool.
The privacy stuff is, is a concern. I think what's great about blockchain is like it, to a great extent anonymizes a lot of that. So we can compile a lot of that, aggregately in an anonymous way, where it's like it's great because it fulfills a lot of, it doesn't get into GDPR, like those types of privacy, level issues. And that way, and it's something that authors, as an author, it'd be great to know, like, hey, when everybody gets to chapter 4, they stop reading my book. Like what happened? Like, why did they just cumulatively, why did everybody stop reading my book at this point? And it even opens up this idea on the NFT side where it's like, well, you could even release NFTs chapter by chapter even. So our construct of long form content in general can change, where it's like, well, they could write that in real time, maybe as a purchaser, I have to then collect all of these chapters to then be in a book club with the author and discuss what's going on with those characters. And we can verify if the person has not only bought those NFT chapters, but if they've actually read each one in order to allow them into the club, right? So it creates like this just huge construct where you take sort of almost the Bored Ape Yacht Club idea, and it's, you basically apply that in a micro way down to all authors and all publishers and all series, and allow them to aggregately create virtual clubs about their books and content.
This is crazy. Who would have thought you can take this far? I'd started this interview thinking, oh yeah, you're going to blockchain and digitalize books. This goes way deeper than all that. And your experience in working in the publishing industry shows like you've been in it, more than 12 years of
we got involved in it originally back in 2008. And then it was just, it's been a great industry. I think walking in, you would have, we kind of had the same approach where it's like, books are kind of boring. It's not sexy. It's not cool. But really, when you get down to it, it's like, well, it actually is very cool because, and just taking it, looking at it through the lens of, like our approach is maybe different than a lot of maybe crypto for crypto's sake, or specifically DeFi, or, staking and yield farming. And like all, I'll take a quote from you, the crypto granny, right? It's like the crypto granny, right? She has, while she may own some crypto, she's probably most definitely bought ebooks, right? And when you look at the total amount of people across the world who've bought any digital anything, like ebooks are by far and away on a per unit basis the highest digital volume of anything that's ever been purchased, because I stream all my music now, I stream all my video now, but publishers own the content for books, and those individualized books are the largest aggregate number of digital goods that get sold. So we have an opportunity here to onboard, just like, I mean, when we sold our last company, we had 6 million users. And I would say that was, kicking and screaming and fighting with my board and, not doing what we wanted to do to expand it even. If we even did just that to Cardano, it's like we would more than, we're at like 3 million-ish wallets right now. If we onboard another 6 million people into the ecosystem, and we're talking about a gigantic, multiplier to the entire system. So we're looking at it as like, how do we leverage this so that we can get the, the crypto grannies of the world? And, my mom has bought, ebooks, but she's not going to, go buy Meld and, put it into a pool. It's just, that's too far out there. And so not that that's bad stuff. And like, I'm a nerd and I geek out about that, but we're thinking in terms of like, hey, how do we, and how do we leverage books in massive ways, like grow the whole Cardano ecosystem, and, which is going to be great for all of us who are in early. And it's like, if we can go out and, if you look at the total numbers, by like next year, I think in year in, there's going to be like 1.1 billion people have purchased an ebook. So it's like, even a fragment of that if we can onboard into crypto is just like, I feel like, which I'm biased, that is true Web3 utility and onboarding people into the crypto ecosystem. And they're likely not going to even be aware of it, right? We're not approaching it in a similar way where I think, a lot of projects are very, Cardano, hoorah, or, Polkadot, hoorah. And we're thinking it more in terms of, well, I wouldn't go tell them like, let me tell you how awesome it is that this is, built in PHP and that we use JavaScript. And it's like, because the person that's buying an ebook, they just don't, there's like, can I buy my ebook? They don't care. Can I buy my ebook? And then when I'm done with it, could I sell it back? And maybe it's worth more, or maybe it's worth way, way less. But even if I only got $1 back, it's infinitely more than what it is trapped on my other bookshelves right now. So the value proposition of the Web3 for books is huge for the end consumer.
Web3 is definitely the way. And I think this is a very ideal use case for NFTs as well. Like,
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. NFTs are evolving. Like originally a profile pic, whatever it is, but the utility and the usage for them. And this is absolutely perfect for what NFTs are made for and what Web3 is going to enable, which is I'm so excited for. And I really hope you guys get this project out soon. Now, that user experience that you're talking about for Crypto Granny, there is actually a Crypto Granny that watches the podcast videos. That's awesome. So shout out to her. The user experience for her, the way that I see it in the end, they'll just maybe download an app on their iPad, register maybe, and they won't see a crypto wallet or anything. They'll just go straight to a marketplace, punch in a couple of things, buy it with a fiat currency, whatever local currency it is. That's all powered by the blockchain. She gets her book back and away she goes. She just views it in the app. Yeah. Is that the end goal experience that you're aiming for? Or will there still be some sort of wallet on the side that you have to use? Like what's your end game for the user journey experience?
It's a great question. So structurally, all that stuff does happen. We're doing a lot of that behind the scenes. So we're spawning a wallet. We're creating a lot of infrastructure so that they don't have to come in and like connect a NAMI or something. And from the publisher perspective, right? The publishers have apprehension about this being too technically difficult. Not that they think that readers are, they're not, when you look at all of these readers and then, this many that are in crypto, the overlap is not as great. So they want to make sure that it's easy for their end user. So we're still going to provide like a, like we have architected a, effectively like a pro option, right? So like if you want to flip to pro, well, then you can see all your wallet addresses. You can see where everything's stored. You can send it off chain. Like we don't, our to your question of like end goal, like our end goal is we're going to provide an SDK so that any other reader out there, like a Nook or a Kindle or iBooks, if they want to ingest the SDK and allow a user to store a book or send a book around, then they could open that book in that reader, right? Because the SDK is really the decryption engine and the assembler for all of the sharded files. So that way, if somebody's like, man, I just really love reading on Kindle, okay, that's great. Then, go read it on Kindle. And if you want to, give me the book because we're having coffee and you think it's cool, you can scan a QR code. Now it's on my shelf and I want to read it on iBooks. It really makes it completely portable. So we want to make it, from the end user perspective, seamless. But if you are more advanced and crypto native, like have those capabilities still, so you can store stuff off chain. Because some of the, like, we're talking some really big, like, top selling authors of, literally the last, 2-3 decades. And when we mint some of their stuff, it's going to be extremely valuable. So since it is just a native Cardano token, if you want to store that offline, and in a wallet, you can totally send that off and store it somewhere. So we don't want to prohibit that, but we do want to make it a seamless experience for the, all the crypto noobs coming in, so they don't have to know anything. There's no barrier to entry, right? We want to make it as easy almost as like Coinbase. So it's like, hey, we need an email address and a password, and you can get started, and then you can go as deep down that rabbit hole as you want. And we want that to be the beginning of the rabbit hole, really, and start leading them down that path. Really
cool. I think that's a perfect user experience that you're painting, and if it's executed, I could see that kind of model being used elsewhere as well in the industry and replicated for whatever it is, selling cars. Yep. Even I don't know. That's the first thing that popped to my mind. But yeah,
we think about it a lot in terms of like, how do we bring that, like, the ease of like Web 2, UX focus into, that melding completely with the Web3 capability. And I think what's happened and what's been exciting is that a lot of these Web3 things have stood up, but they are very technical, and it is very early, very, very early, and it requires like technical understanding to get in and play with those things. And we're getting to that point, just like you said, like with used cars or something, where we can now begin, industries can begin to overlay like the ease of like how to leverage that technology in a way that makes sense, and then also bring in the overlay of Web 2 or user experience, and make it very seamless and easy for people to to migrate to blockchain based solutions.
Very much so. So what kind of team is building this out? So it's obviously not just yourself. Who else is working on this? How big's the team and et cetera?
Yeah. So we actually have brought a lot of the guys back from our last book endeavor. So we brought back our CTO. We brought back our chief growth officer. I think you talked with him. We have a couple other developers, mobile engineers, and then we actually have a group that we're using who had been the head of technology at Zappos, of all places. They've actually done a couple of Web 3 projects. They've built an exchange. They've built several NFT kind of solutions. It was, what's funny is our CTO, he was and had always been, and we had actually written a lot of our last endeavor in Haskell. And so when we sort of started this back up, and he was interested into blockchain stuff, but more to the extent of like, the far technical side. So it was like when we told him like, hey, we're getting the band back together, and it's written in Haskell, and he's like, could not be happier, because it's his playground. So yeah, it's been fun to see how quickly we've been able to reassemble everyone. And I think when I started it, I thought, well, when I go back to these guys, they're going to be like, no, I'm done with, we did books before, like, I don't have any interest. And it's like the exact opposite. It's almost like, oh, we get like a second shot to like fix everything that we knew was wrong.
Yeah.
And build what we really need to build, which is kind of, sort of taking, like I said at the beginning, like that Charles ethos of just like, we're going to build what needs to be built for the future of books. We're not going to build stuff just to say, oh man, we got to profitability this fast. And it's all about that. Like, we don't, we have no interest in going down that path, because it wrecks the future scalability of the project. So, yeah.
And of course, it's really hard to pivot when things are built into the blockchain. It's a hell of a lot harder. So how does the token work in regards to the platform? So I saw in the white paper and on the website, there's a token that's in play. How does that come into the ecosystem with Book Token?
Yeah, so our book token is kind of unique. So the way that we frame it, and this was kind of mimicking some stuff that we had done in the past, but it's basically a reading reward. So since we have a reading verification system, we basically pay people to read effectively is the idea. So we want to, as we have this, simple path and we bring in the people that are new to the system, we want to incentivize them to actually read. So as they read, they're earning they're earning our book token in actual cryptocurrency, and getting paid to do that. And then they can use that as basically a discount mechanism when they go to purchase their next book. So what's kind of unique about it is that, we refer to it as like knowledge mining or like reader mining. And so instead of, hey, we have a bunch of systems and they're all, processing, maybe in like proof of work idea. But what we're saying is like, hey, the collective, the collection of all of our minds reading and becoming better is what is mining our token. So like the guts of it is that we'll distribute it over a 51-year period. And then basically that's allocated. So every day there's a swath of awards that are possible based on however much you've read. And so then, in our reader system, we have, a lot of preventative mechanisms. So you can't like reread stuff. You can't read outside of your normal speed or outside the average speed that books are. So we make it difficult to like hack it so that you truly have to like actually read the book to earn our token. And so, and we based that kind of off of some of that reader reward stuff. But then what was funny, which is, kind of a hilarious comparison, but like what Hosky did, right? Hosky token to me is just such a funny like case study, because it's like intrinsically, the idea is like, well, the coin's worth nothing, but everybody had to send ADA over, and it's a very slow process, right? It's like you send 2 ADA over and then you get some back and you're like, oh, it actually worked. And then you send 2 more and and you keep going. And then you start to realize, now you have all these guys that, the me millionaires that have these huge, wallets of Hosky. And that, like I looked the other day and somebody sent me something and I was like, holy smokes, like I actually have like a couple $100 in Hosky. Like, it's ridiculous. And it's like, well, what you back out of that. And it's like, well, because you spent your time, and your time has some value associated with it. Right. And so that's what we're trying to create too, is like, you're spending your time to read and there's some value associated with that. Right. So to the extent of like, what is it, what's the actual worth? I don't know, like, where that shakes out. But the idea that if I actually read and consume the content and earn something for my time that I invested in it, and then I can apply that toward my next purchase of something I want to read, is like a fascinating way where like the industry has just approached it from, we just need to sell more and sell more and sell more. And we don't really care if people read it. We just need to sell more. And we're saying like, well, it actually does matter if people read. And like, publishers do want people to read, authors do want people to read, but like retailers end up in this cycle of like, they just want to sell. Yeah. And we really want people to like consume that and be rewarded for the stuff that they're reading.
Wow, that's an amazing concept. Read to earn, play to earn. It's
absolutely, yeah, read to earn.
Yeah, or knowledge mining, as you termed it. Absolutely love it. That's a really cool idea and concept. Again, it's these ideas that you're bringing together. I guess it all comes down from your experience and years in the industry, and finding those pain points and trying to reward and fix, essentially fix. Like you said, you do want people to read.
Absolutely.
You'd probably hate to hear this, but I haven't read a book in probably decades.
Well, what's funny is like a lot of the stuff that we're creating, we want it to end up being used for any long form type of content, right? So, and then it can apply to, structurally, right? Like it can apply to any other types of media as well, right? So it could be, comic stuff, it could be newsprint, it could even be blogs, right? Yeah. Like if you're all of that, I think of and going back to in terms of like, hey, all of that long form content, all the stuff that we do, like, I wish I could read more books. Like I do read quite a bit. I wish I had time to read more. I'm reading all day long, like I'm constantly reading and adjusting stuff. But it's like, but where does that live? And is it persistent? Like, should blog content have a underlying structure that allows all of that to exist outside of, like, Google's cloud got hacked or something, and now all that stuff's gone? It should be redundant. And I should, if we algorithmically learn so much about what people are consuming, so then we can present better options for new stuff that may be of interest to them as well. So we think of it in terms of, like, real long term here, like how could we capture the idea of that spirit of, like, we want to, basically we want to pay people to read, right? We want to pay them for all the time that they spend. Because I'm sure, even though you haven't read a book in a while, I'm sure you basically spend 10 hours a day reading, because it's just constant reading. And I have two smaller kids, they're 10 and 8, and it's like, they're going through all this stuff right now about, reading. It's like, my daughter likes to read, my son hates to read. And I'm like, hey man, you're going to be reading all day long, every day for the rest of your life. So you just need to find the right things to read, right? And even with you, it's like you find the right things to read. They're not necessarily packaged together, in paper on a shelf, but there is long form content that you're diving into, and we want to, like, help incentivize more of that and reward that ingestion of it.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so what I was getting at, I don't read for pleasure, like a novel, fantasy book, whatever it is. I haven't read anything like that in a very long time. But you're right, I do spend hours and hours in front of the screen reading white papers and documentation and manuals and I don't know, help files.
Well, you say you don't read for fun, but that's the fun stuff I read all the time.
You have a point.
It's still great reading it. It's like, and what's funny is, like, my co-founder Ben, he is very in sci-fi and fantasy, and I'm the exact opposite. Like, I'm, I read a ton of business books. I read, like, a lot of, like, autobiography stuff. But, like, you're exactly right. It's like I read a ton of white papers. I read a ton of, like, I'm constantly reading, like, all this in the space, just crypto news, like, crazy. I mean, it's just, and it moves at such a fast pace, and you're just constantly ingesting. And and that I'd say that is, a huge portion of my pleasure reading is just crypto.
All right. So in terms of, like, building up this business and funding it, how are you guys raising funds to actually get this off the road? It sounds like you may have some initial funding and whatnot to use to start up the project and, like you said, bring the team back together. But how is the project going to get the extra boost in funding to take it to where you want it to be? What's the general business model? How are you going to earn income and revenue off the platform as well? Can you give us some insights?
Yeah, for sure. So thankfully we were able to bring a lot of our own resource initially. So we've been self-funded on a lot of it. We actually did a very small kind of private seed token sell and raised some money through that. We're going to be launching an initial token offering, probably starting in the next maybe 45 days or so. And we've been going back and forth on some of the legal stuff and all the territory stuff and all those things that are necessary to make sure that it's regulated. But ultimately, like, we may end up taking some VC money if it's the right partnership. So, like, in the print and publishing world, like, another derivative thing we're going to do is combine print and digital together, so that and we've worked with some really big print partners in the past. We think there's a huge future in that, and there's a lot of money and a lot of interest in that area. So we may, our goal is to sell the least amount of the company from a VC perspective, because we don't want that to dilute or, derail anything that we're doing. So, like, it would be very cautious and very, like, specific. I think we're probably, we've been doing great on the self-funding side. And, as far as, like, how we make revenue, right? In the States, it's regulated like that. A split when a first sell happens is like a 70-30 split. So anybody who's selling an ebook, it's like, federally regulated that, like, we have to earn 30%. The unique thing with NFTs, though, is, like, these aren't, and this is actually interesting. Like if you dig back through it, there was like a big lawsuit that involved basically Steve Jobs and and price fixing amongst him and iBooks and Amazon and this collusion. And like, it's pretty interesting, like history on books and pricing. But so all that gets kind of regulated. But with an NFT, since, if you own number one of, some special edition book, and I own number, the 100,000th one, well, yours is way more valuable because it was made first. So they're not necessarily, it's not apples to apples. So there's some, what we've been talking to a lot of publishers about now is like exactly how that looks. So, we still earn a portion up front anytime a new book sells. And then as far as the smart contract and the, secondhand sales and the perpetuity, like we'll basically take a 2.5% fee, just like OpenSea. So that's effectively what we'll operate it off of, is just like that transaction fee.
Okay. It sounds like you do need a lot of volume of that, or high ticket sale prices through the marketplace. Like some of the marketplaces at that rate, the 2.5%, still don't make enough to pay all their staff, employees, and whatnot. So
yeah, thankfully most ebook retailers make, they've never had that 2.5% on the back, and they only make the 30% up front. So we'll be in a better cash position there. And we actually, and it's pretty crazy, like in the last 2 months, like how many publishing conversations that we're having with all of the old publishers that we worked with. They're just getting tremendous pressure from their authors who are asking to do NFT based books.
Wow.
And so it's super exciting. Like we're going to be rolling out with some massive publishing partners, like some big 5 publishers with some titles and authors that are going to be huge. I mean, they'll be huge for the space. Okay,
then. So my next question is when?
So right now we're exactly. We're rushing as fast as we can, but back to that thing of we don't want to put it out too early. So we're in our prototype development stage right now, and that is going to be getting released to some of the publishers, and probably sometime, hopefully before June. Contractually, like they have to see some of this stuff and sign off on it from a legal perspective, because it's a new space for them. So they have to, give the green light on like functionally how it happens and just territorially. So we're hoping by like early summer, probably like sometime, hopefully before the end of July, we're going to roll live with like the full platform and launch. And, our goal is to launch really big and launch with a good number of all these publishing partners. We've actually had 3 CEOs from 3 different publishers and invest in the seed round and buy tokens. We've had a lot of authors come in. So our goal is to launch sometime in the summer, but do it big and do it right with really good titles, and not just, not to diminish like self-published, but like, people know celebrity authors, and that's kind of what we want to combine. Initially is like, hey, if we can bring some big names in with like some really good strong titles, like that'll give it this like boost of energy of like, oh wow, like such and such giant publisher is in NFT books now, like that's huge, and get that ball rolling. So
wow. Okay. Let's see if you single-handedly may increase the wallet's count on Cardano by many, many millions.
That's our goal. We keep saying we keep saying we want to be one of the biggest apps. So I think, approaching it this way of like, hey, can we onboard millions of people into, because what we want to leverage on that side too, right, is like when we go to those publishers and what they're excited about is like, they want to go out and really, when you break down like what a publisher is, like they own the IP, but then effectively they are the marketing engine for these authors. And a lot of times, like they manage their Twitter and social, and they work with the author to make sure that big releases happen well. And so working with them is kind of our goal of like, we want them all cumulatively sort of, simultaneously pointing all of their audiences to come and activate, right? There's some really big, like, without, getting myself in trouble. There's some big series of books that have been massive bestsellers that we are talking about. Some super cool, if you own all, 3 or all 6 books, that you get special access to clubs, that you get to, meet the author online, right? Like there's some super cool stuff that's like way bigger club style than just, what happens a lot in the NFT space of like, unknown artists. And it's like, hey, this is really cool. Or maybe it gives me access to some like group of everybody else that owns them. But in our situation, it's like, we have like literal A-list celebrity authors who have, have written things that are like, were, game changing and societally shifting for us, that we watch their movies and stuff. So some super cool stuff that I think will create like huge buzz when it happens.
Absolutely crazy. You give me goosebumps, and you may even get me reading books again. So.
All right.
Let's see if that happens. Josh, mate, this has been absolutely brilliant. How can people find out more about the project and get on the token sale, get on the platform, etc.? What's the best places to go? Yeah, for sure. Our website is just booktoken.io, or you can follow us on Twitter, and you can get to that too from the website. There's a sign up there to sign up to stay in the loop, and we're going to let everybody know when the ITO launches, and keep everybody up to date. So brilliant. I've signed up already. I'm looking forward to this one. Awesome. All right, Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure learning more about Book Token and learning more about the publishing industry as well. I had no idea about all these issues and what they really want out of digital publishing, really. So it's been an absolute pleasure learning all about that and getting to know you a little bit better too. Thanks, Pete. I really appreciate you spending time chatting with us. We're super excited about it, and look forward to staying in contact with you and keeping you updated. So what did you think of that? Please leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of Book Token. Will they succeed? I think they will. Having these ideas and concepts of the read to earn, or knowledge mining as Josh coined it, I think are really cool concepts. If it gets me to read a book, hey presto, I think it's done a really good job. Maybe it'll make you guys read more as well. Who knows? If you enjoy reading, I think this is definitely something to incentivize you to actually read more books, earn some of their cryptocurrency that they're having as well, and actually also engage with the authors. I've never had that type of experience. I've had some really favorite authors when I was growing up reading all these books, and it would have been amazing to actually engage with them at some point in time, and being able to do so within the platform is quite appealing to me. Now, I've left all the links to the Book Token resources down below for you as well, so you can check out their website, check out their white paper, check out their community as well. It's all down there for you. Now, if you really enjoyed this type of content, please consider giving me that thumbs up, click subscribe, click on the notification bell, and you hear more great Cardano content from me soon. See ya.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debate.